Welcome to the third part in this series talking about the history of Thorpe Park. In this episode we are going to go through the noughties, and as with the previous ones I'm going to show you the maps, the rides, celebrities, adverts, weird and wonderful stories, Fright Nights because that comes round, and so much more. So let's get into it. Now we start 2000 with a brand new ride, and that is of course Tidal Wave. Now when this opened it was the tallest water ride in Europe. It is set in Amity Cove, and if you look around some of the buildings in there you can see this kind of green line where the water is supposed to have risen to. It did initially have this flame effect. You'll see this giant ball that's still there to this day, but in a few years time when they install stealth they cut the gas tanks and they've never put them back in, so that effect does not run anymore. Now this attraction has had various sponsors over the year. It started with Original Source, it has then had Dr. Pepper, and it is currently Oasis. And as with many other rides around the park, this one got an advert.
Hi, I'm here at Thorpe Park on Tidal Wave, Europe's highest water ride. Frankly, I don't see what all the fuss is about. Devastation.
Thorpe Park, sensory overload.
Now we got one other attraction this year, and that was a Huss Enterprise. Now it was called Enterprise, it later became Zodiac. There's a little more in this one, but we'll cover that later on in this episode. Now unfortunately the year 2000 was not a great one for the park. They had two pretty big incidents. The first one was in X No Way Out, where a young boy fell 20 feet from the ride, had lacerations to his shins and injuries to his head. And the second one, now this changed the park quite significantly because there was a rather large fire. Now the fire started in Mr. Rabbit's Tropical Travels, but it pretty quickly spread to other buildings, and well, their haunted house, the Wicked Witch's Haunt, I think it was called. Yeah, that was just absolutely totaled, had to be destroyed, and went. Now, I don't know if it was confirmed, but there was rumours that this was started by somebody just having a cigarette and just chucking the fag away, and yeah, it's a pretty big issue for the park, and definitely changed the shape of it over the years to come. In 2001 we got 3 new attractions, although technically one of them I just talked about last year. So we got Zodiac, which as I said used to be called Enterprise. Now this had an incident where part of the ride fell off and 2 teens were injured. This ended up going to court and the park was fined, I think something like £65,000, and as part of that they also had to get rid of the ride. Now you might be sitting there thinking, well, Zodiac's still there. They basically bought another Huss Enterprise and brought it in. So yes, the ride exists, but the very first model that they had broke and had to be got rid of. It did, however, get its own advert.
Zodiac, one of 3 new sensations at Thorpe Park. Thorpe Park, sensory overload.
The second ride that we got in this trio was Vortex, and this is a KFG afterburner. Now there's a story about that one coming up later on as well, but you know, as part of the series, it also got an advert.
Vortex, one of 3 new sensations at Thorpe Park. Thorpe Park, sensory overload.
And the third ride was Detonator, which is a drop tower that I'm sure many of you know still exists on the park to this day. Now, what I really like about this ride, and from looking back over old footage, this hasn't always been the case, but certainly the last time I was there, and I'm hoping in a few weeks when I go it's still the case, is that it's not computer controlled in terms of the drop. It is a manual thing by the operator, and many times when I've been there I've heard the operator kind of wind people up. In fact, I've got an example of it here from another channel where yeah, the ride up kind of just plays with the guests at the top of the tower.
I hope you are having a relaxing and pleasant time at the top of the tower, but all good things must come to an end. In 5, in 4, in 3, in 2, in 1. That's what I would be saying if I was dropping you now, but I'm not.
Cool. Cool. Oh, this guy likes to keep us up here in the air. What do I say now?
Now, unsurprisingly, given that the other two got an advert, so did Detonator.
Detonator, one of 3 new sensations at Thorpe Park. Thorpe Park, sensory overload.
I can't tell when this picture was taken, but since we're talking about Detonator, I did find a photo of Ant and Dec sitting on the ride. Now, the park has had a few logos over the years, and, well, let's just say the latest one, as we'll get to in a few episodes' time, was a little controversial. There's still people that aren't a fan of this, don't like it, but this was the year, 2001, was the first year we started to see the Infinity logo, which I think most people, myself included, will always associate with Thorpe Park. Now, 2002 was another big year for the park because they introduced Colossus. Now, at the time when Colossus was added to the park, it was the world's first 10-looping coaster. Now, obviously that has since been beaten. Interestingly, Merlin beat himself by putting Smiler in Alton Towers. But anyway, it was the first 10-looping coaster. Now there is there is a nearly identical version of this further up the road at Flamingo Land in the form of Sick. There are a couple of differences to the lift hill, but the key difference is that Sick has lap bars and Colossus has over-the-shoulder restraints. Now, I've still not been on Colossus. I've been to the park a few times, and every time I'm there, the damn thing's shut. So fingers crossed when I go in a few weeks, the damn thing's open and I get on it. Although from what I've heard, I've not been missing much. Everybody says the restraints are horrific. There's no leg space, really, really uncomfortable. And that might partly be down to the fact that when the ride first opened, it was quite open and people were putting their legs outside. So on the opening year, they temporarily put some barriers up to some metal plates to stop people taking their feet out. And then from what I've heard, it was modified slightly on a more permanent basis, again to prevent this. And yeah, everyone says there's no leg room. That's probably deliberate, so that you kind of get your feet out there. But it'd be amazing if they could get those lap bars from the trains up at Flamingo Land. But I've also heard from some that even though it's the same ride and the same layout, that it's not compatible. I don't know if that's true or not, but they've obviously been doing some work this year to the ride as part of the Sparkle project. They're giving it a nice paint job, so it would be amazing to see them replace these restraints, because yeah, they don't look pretty. Now, what's even more interesting is that we almost didn't get that ride, or rather, one of the proposed rides was a B&M coaster, not too dissimilar to the Hulk over in Islands of Adventure. So we could have had a very, very different ride in Thorpe Park. One of the things I always find quite funny is when the media and these TV shows kind of rope their presenters into going on rides, and they typically find somebody who is absolutely petrified of roller coasters and go, on you go. So this morning did that, and they sent Josie Gibson on. Now, it'll come as no surprise to anybody, especially given what we've just had the previous year. Major coaster like this, it got its own advert, and it's an interesting one, because they're clearly trying to imply you're going to be ridiculously dizzy when you get off of this 10-looping coaster.
The world's first 10-looping roller coaster, Colossus. It never leaves you. Thorpe Park.
Now, one thing I thought was quite interesting when I was researching this was the year that the park introduced Fast Track, and from what I can tell, it's changed a couple of times over the years. The original system involved having kind of machines near the 3 big rides, not too dissimilar to the old Fast Pass system that Disney used to have, where you would rock up and you would be given a ticket and it would say, you know, come back at such and such a time. And it was a free Fast Track service. Obviously, it is no longer free, and I've also seen tickets from a kind of intermediate system to what we have now that look like you were given a printed, like, almost itinerary of you must go on this ride at this time and this ride at this time and da-da-da-da-da. Whereas now, as we all know, the Fast Track system, you know, it's expensive, but you basically can just go up to the ride whenever you want and just say, hey, fast track, let me on. So yeah, but I thought it was interesting that this was free at one point, and yeah, nothing's free nowadays. 2002 also saw a fireworks show. It looks like quite an impressive fireworks show. It was kind of volcano themed. Not sure how long it stuck around, but anyway, I found some footage of it. Now, when I say Thorpe Park to most of you, there's probably one thing that springs to mind, and probably amongst all enthusiasts, and that is Fright Nights. Now, this is now synonymous with the park. It is one of their biggest attractions, biggest events. But 2002 was the first year that these existed. And we started off with just 2 different mazes. The first one was the Freezer. Now, from what I can read online, this one is still to this day thought to be one of the best ones that they have ever done. It was a sort of free maze, so it wasn't a guided, you must go through this way. It was like, on you go, explore, crap yourself, go through this maze. And it got itself an advert.
It's cold in there.
So cool, it's scary. The Freezer, this fall.
And the second one was Freak Show 3D. Now this was in part of the queue line for X No Way Out, because I think I mentioned previously that used to have a fairly extensive queue line and that got kind of reduced over time, and portions of that were used for scare mazes. Didn't get too much about this one, but it certainly sounds like the Freezer was the kind of standout show from 2002. It's kind of crazy to think that this actually happened. Certainly nowadays it almost certainly would not happen, maybe in the American parks. But 2003 we got another big coaster. Now we obviously just got Colossus in 2002, but in 2003 we got Nemesis Inferno. Now obviously the Merlin group, sorry, at this point it was Tussauds. Tussauds had seen, a lot of success from Nemesis up in Alton Towers, hugely successful, and they obviously thought, well, let's do the same down in Thorpe Park. It's weird because, it's called Nemesis Inferno, but has a very, very different theme. Like, it's set in a volcano. I'm not entirely sure how Nemesis and Nemesis Inferno are connected, other than the name and the fact that they're both Merlin attractions. Now, there's a lot of debate amongst the enthusiast community about which is better. There is people firmly in the camp of Nemesis at Towers, and there are people firmly in the camp of Nemesis Reborn. So I'd love to know below which one you think is the best. Interestingly, a bit like last year, when I said that Colossus was almost a B&M, Nemesis was almost not a B&M, because there's some proposals looking at, when you look around, that this could have ended up being very similar to Rock and Roller Coaster from Disney. So this would have been an Intamin launch coaster. Again, if we'd got that Hulk instead of Colossus and Rock and Roller Coaster instead of Nemesis, Thorpe Park would be quite different. You're probably getting sick of these by now, but guess what? New ride, new advert.
Feel the heat of Nemesis Inferno, now at Thorpe Park.
There's 2 flat rides added in 2003. One of them was Quantum. I mean, it's still there, I don't know what to say. It's a flying carpet ride. And the other one was Eclipse. Now, this was extremely short-lived. This was basically a Ferris wheel, big giant Ferris wheel. Did not last, and as you will find out soon, it did a little swap with Chessington, and we got another ride from them. So Yeah, we'll get to that in a minute. A new show was added to the arena. I said previously there used to be a Popeye show. This time it was Turn of Spider-Man. So we got a Spider-Man show, was a little bit more kind of stunt heavy. Obviously this was the second year of Fright Nights. There was a few tweaks to the mazes, but they also introduced, or they put some film into the 4D cinema. Although from what I've heard, the best part was when there was kind of like a simulated breakdown during the Chainsaw Massacre. This does get better as the years go on though. Right, so it's 2004, and I kind of alluded to the fact in the last year that Eclipse didn't last and it buggered off to Chessington. That was a little switcheroo because we got Samurai. So Samurai used to be at Chessington, and it is now part of Thorpe Park. Now this is a Mondial top scan. Interestingly, I've seen some reports that this is a pretty tame cycle. I've been on it, and actually I was quite underwhelmed. I kind of assumed it was going to be a lot more intense, which is kind of surprising because Thorpe Park is, you know, an intense park. It's the thrill capital and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, I mean, if you ever go on one of these on the travelling circuit, it's a damn sight more intense than the one at Thorpe Park. And it has now been repainted back to its original colour scheme this year, so it's looking fantastic. I do wonder sometimes. The park got a world record in 2004, but it wasn't for the tallest, it wasn't for the fastest, it wasn't for the most inversions. It was for the most naked people on a roller coaster. Now, 81 students turned up, took their kit off and got on Nemesis. It only counts as 28 because the way the Guinness Book of Records looked at it was how many people can get on the train. Well, Nemesis has 28 seats. They lost that record to the other Nemesis a few years later because turns out Nemesis in Towers has an extra row of seats, so it can do 32. There's an interesting quote from Surrey Live, and that was one of the guests saying, "It also rained from time to time during the naked raiding, making it even colder, and for most of the men, it was not their finest hour, so to speak." No idea what they're talking about. Now, I alluded in the last year to the fact that the 4D cinema thing got better as time went on. It did come back in 2004, except this time instead of being movie clips, it was live actors. And certainly from what I've read, it was far better received. If you're enjoying this, please consider giving it a thumbs up and subscribing. I have been getting so much support from you guys lately. It is so much appreciated, every single one of you. Thank you so much. If you remember this decade, I would love to hear some stories down below, particularly if there's any of these attractions that you were massive fans of, or indeed if there's anything I've missed. It sounds like from the 80s I missed a few shows. So yeah, let me know what I've missed and let's keep going. We got two new flat rides in 2005, and the first one was a UK first, in fact, and actually to this day, still the only one in the UK. So we got Rush, which was the first Scream and Swing. It didn't have the best start though, because on opening day, it broke down after 4 cycles. Sounds a little bit like Hyperia. And the second flat ride that we got was the Slammer. Now this is a very unique ride, and in fact there was only ever 2 of these made. This is an S&S Sky Swap. You've seen it, you know what it's like, right? It's these 2 platforms that sit on a giant arm with seats that raises up, locks into place, and then kind of starts doing rotations and all sorts of stuff. Visually stunning, amazing ride to watch. Again, in the community it's mixed. There are people who absolutely love this thing, and there are people who absolutely hated this thing. And it seems that most of the hatred comes from the restraints, and S&S have these bonkers restraints. I've seen an interview where they say that they're trying to make the restraints as small as humanly possible to minimize how much they're holding you in, like, so that it gives that fear factor. That's called a lap bar. That's called a lap bar, but they've got these weird, I mean, they do have a lap bar, and then they've got these bonkers little hook things that go over your shoulders. If you didn't go on Slammer, get yourself up to Flamingo Land and go on Mumbo Jumbo, because it's got the same damn restraints and they're not very comfortable. But the ride itself, although visually impressive, was not the most reliable. It broke down numerous times, and was a maintenance headache for the park. Now we all know the park has now decided to get rid of the ride. It's been shut for many years, and they've confirmed that 2024 they are removing it. They're physically dismantling it, getting rid of the damn thing. So it's a little bit of history. That's both of them. The other one that was over in America, it disappeared a long time ago. So yeah, when this goes in 2024, no more S&S Sky Spots. Now you'll see throughout the next couple of decades, there's quite a few different themed events that the park held. And this year we got the PlayStation 2 Freedom Weekender. Now this included free to party beach bash. That's a tongue twister. Smallest disco in the world, SingStar Party, and Free to Fight, which was basically an inflatable sumo wrestling. As well as that, there was also a number of small stages set up around the park. There was one near Colossus, there was another near Nemesis Inferno, and these had acts like Ian Brown and Razorlight. And then on the Saturday there was an exclusive after hours gig, which had competition winners. 450 lucky competition winners got to see a Faithless gig, which was broadcast on Channel 4 and E4. Now, another trend you're going to see as we go through this, the arena held a stunt show. Now it's had many shows over the years, and they all seem to be stunts, BMX bikes, cars, just the same with different names, but we'll cover the rest as the decade goes on. Now, from a scare maze point of view, there was two. There was Asylum, which from what I've seen was a rebranded Freezer, and then the other one was Hellgate. Now this one didn't seem to be as popular. Definitely seems like Asylum was the better of the mazes in this year. Now this is a pretty impressive decade, and actually I did ask in a poll, I asked you guys which decade you thought was the best. Unsurprisingly, 2000 was, or the noughties was the decade that you chose, because we got quite a few coasters. I've already mentioned Colossus and Nemesis, and in 2006 we got Stealth. Now, until Hyperia opened, this was the tallest coaster in the park. I think it's still the third tallest in the UK. Interestingly, there was a few proposed names for this ride, including Peak Fear, The Edge, Icon, Demon's Drop, and the Humdinger. Now, if rumours to be believed, they'd actually settled on The Edge, and then had to change it quite last minute because Pizza Hut, of all people, had a pizza called The Edge, and they trademarked the damn thing. So instead of The Edge, we got Stealth. I don't know when this photo was taken, but I said I'd include celebrities. I did get a picture, not personally, I wasn't there with the camera. I found a picture of Angelina Jolie on Stealth. So remember I mentioned last year we got Slammer and it was not reliable and it was a bit of a maintenance nightmare. Well, in 2006 it broke down for over an hour, so guests were stuck in the freezing cold for an hour on that ride. Not pleasant. In terms of shows, the arena this time got Street Extreme. It was another BMX run. It was a little bit different this year. We got an X Factor style show where guests could kind of, show off their talents. It was called Be Discovered, and they had celebrity judges including Coronation Street's Richard Fleischman and S Club 7's Joe O'Meara. From a Fright Night's point of view, there was a new maze called Seven, and it was called that because it was themed around the 7 deadly sins. It sounds like it wasn't the best scare maze, but it got a little trailer. So 2007, this is when Tussauds sold the park to Merlin, who obviously to this day still run the park. Now on the 3rd of August, Virgin Radio presented a live show from the park, and actually they had a live performance from the Hoosiers. I mean, I found a video off the Hoosiers, but it looks like it's been filmed on a potato because, well, cameras were crap in the early 2000s, so trust me, this is the Hoosiers. I found mention that they tried to get in the Guinness Book of Records again. Not quite as crazy as the Naked People that they did before. This time they were going for the largest queue line karaoke. They played Kylie Minogue Locomotion, and apparently 6,321 guests sang along. However, I can't find any reference to this on the Guinness Book of Records, so I'm not sure if it was not officially sanctioned, allowed, whatever the word is, or if it was subsequently beaten. But if you were in that queue and you sang the Locomotion, let me know. Again, sticking with me finding random TV shows, it's not really random, it's Blue Peter, but I found an episode of Blue Peter where they were in Thorpe Park. I can't tell what year it is, but it includes Stealth, along with a couple of other coasters from different parks, so I'm going to assume roughly 2007? Again, as I said earlier with the Josie thing from Colossus, these TV shows tend to find presenters that are petrified of coasters.
I'll be riding Stealth at Thorpe Park with 12-year-old fan Emma. It's the fastest roller coaster in the UK, accelerating from 0 to 80 miles per hour in just over 2 seconds.
Hey Emma.
Hey.
Now, you're a big fan of roller coasters, aren't you?
Yeah.
Thanks for your email. And Stealth is your favourite?
Yeah.
How many times have you been on it?
About 20 times.
20 times. Why?
It's so fun, it's just, yeah.
In 2008 was a pretty busy year. One of the first things we got was a new 4D show. So Pirates 4D disappeared and we got Time Voyagers. Now this was two robots, two robots called Bix and Ting. It was actually a show that was nicked from Gardaland, again, Merlin. The version I found online is in Italian. So there was an English version, because I don't think it had subtitles. So we got another show in the arena. Again, it was bikes, but it had a different name. This time it was Bulldog Extreme. And then we had another Extreme show in the Dome with Streetball Extreme. Another one that I alluded to earlier was with Rush. There was an incident with Rush this year where a part of it fell off mid-cycle. And despite people having cameras that were like potatoes, somebody managed to film it. The park featured in two more TV shows. One that's probably well known was there was a little scene in a small show, maybe never heard of it, called The In-Betweeners. They went on Nemesis Inferno.
Let's get on and sit at the front next to these inconsiderate arseholes.
And in the second one, there was a show called Primeval, and there was an episode in Thorpe Park, although it wasn't Thorpe Park. I mean, it was in Thorpe Park, but they didn't call it that. And, you know, I mean, I'm slagging off the cameras for being like potatoes, but CGI was pretty crap back then too, so here's a little snippet from that show. The park also had some Roman actors this year in the form of the Fungineers, which were just bizarrely dressed people wandering around and trying to be scientific little geeks.
Hello, is it on? Is it on? It's not on. I'll do my calculations. I think it is on because it says on my device.
A fourth maze was added for Fright Nights this year, and it was called The Curse. Now, from what I can tell, this was a fairly decent scare maze, had a decent backstory, it was well themed, etc. But from the outside, it was just a tent. There was no theming on the outside. All the effort went to the inside.
Thrill seekers! Save it for Thorpe Park! Book now at thorpepark.com.
Alright, so we end the decade with a fourth coaster, which, you know, 4 coasters in 10 years in one park. That's pretty impressive and certainly not something we see nowadays. So the fourth coaster we got was Saw the Ride. Now, this was marketed as the world's first horror-themed attraction. bit of a stretch for a world's first, but okay. Now at the time it was the steepest drop in the UK. It didn't last long because Mumbo Jumbo took that off them. It was opened by a bunch of celebrities, so there is some footage, or sorry, not footage, there are some photos of Jonathan Ross, Katie Price, etc. It broke down, so they were stranded on it for a little bit, but seems to be a recurring theme with opening of any attraction these days. And now, as with the other coasters that we got in this decade, Saw the Ride could have been a very, very different attraction if some of the plans had come to fruition. There were plans floating around for a GCI wooden coaster. Now, we know Merlin in the UK hasn't really done much with woodies. I mean, we got Wicker Man a few years later in 2018. They do have some wooden coasters internationally in their parks, but yeah, we would have potentially got one here in Thorpe Park. Now, what was interesting about this one was the way that it kind of interacted with Logger's Leap, because it was said to go through the tunnel and it had a station flyover and flyby. It could have been quite an interesting ride. Now, obviously, that area is where Hyperia sits today, so things would be very different. But yeah, we nearly got a Woody in Thorpe Park. Got another bike show. Again, new name. This time it was called the Extreme Action Stunt Show. Maybe 2000 was a different time, I don't know. But the market in 2009 was odd. Best word I can put for it. So the first thing they did was they had a campaign. So there was a heat wave going on, and they wanted people to not put their arms up because of BO. Yep. I mean, later on in the pandemic, China tried to get people not to scream because of the pandemic, so not that unique, but that's an interesting one. Yorkie sponsored Stealth back when Yorkie was like a man's chocolate. That certainly wouldn't fly nowadays. And struggling to believe this is real, but from what I can tell, this is legit. They put out an advert. Oh, sorry, yeah, no, it was an advert. Don't know what they were thinking. They put this up on YouTube and it didn't last very long before they took it back down again. So enjoy this one. So there we go, that is the Naughties. An interesting year, definitely some weird decisions going on in there, and a hell of a lot of cracking rides that were added to the park. If you've enjoyed this one, make sure you give it a thumbs up, consider subscribing. I have been Chris, you have been watching Coaster Dad, and I shall see you in the 4th episode, which is probably up there.